You think your family just disrespects you? Mine scheduled a closing on my rental property like they owned the deed. I was seconds away from losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because they treated my life's work as their piggy bank. But they forgot one variable: the stranger across the desk who spotted the lie. When that single thread was pulled, their entire tapestry of secrets didn't just unravel, it shredded. My name is Tessa Langford. I am 34 years old. And if my career at Northbridge Civic Studio has taught me anything, it is that a paper trail does not bleed, it does not lie, it does not forget. I live my life by the black and white certainty of signed contracts and stamped permits. In my world, chaos is just a project that has not been managed yet. I was sitting in my corner office in Port Clayton, Oregon, staring at a timeline for the new municipal library renovation. The morning light was hitting the spread of blueprints on my desk, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. The coffee in my mug was still hot. My life was ordered. My investments were secure. My boundaries were, I believed, made of reinforced concrete. Then my phone vibrated against the mahogany veneer of the desk. The screen lit up with a photo of my brother, Jared. I frowned. Jared never called during work hours unless he needed bail money or a character reference for a landlord. He was 36, going on 16, a man who still believed that charm was a valid form of currency. I slid the unlock icon and put the phone to my ear. "Hey, Jared," I said, keeping my voice clipped. "I am in the middle of a spec review. Is this an emergency?" "Not an emergency," Jared said. His voice sounded too light, too airy. It was the tone he used when he had already done something stupid and was waiting for the fallout to hit. "Actually, it is good news. You just need to take a long lunch tomorrow. Maybe clear the afternoon." I stopped typing. "Why?" "We need you at the Escrow office downtown, the one on 4th Street. Mom and Dad finally closed the deal." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Closed what deal? They sold the lake cabin?" I knew our parents had been talking about downsizing for years, but the cabin was underwater on its mortgage and needed a new roof. Selling it would be a miracle, not a deal. "No, not the cabin," Jared said, and I could hear him chewing on something. Gum. He was nervous. "The rental, the one on Cedar Avenue." The air in my office seemed to vanish. My lungs pumped, but nothing happened. "Excuse me?" I said. My voice dropped an octave. "The rental," Jared repeated, speaking faster now. "Dad got a great offer. Cash buyer. They want to close fast. So the signing is set for tomorrow at 11 in the morning. You just need to come down and sign the deed over so the funds can release." I stood up. I did not remember standing up. But suddenly I was looking out the window at the gray Oregon drizzle, my hand gripping the phone so hard the plastic case creaked. "Jared," I said, speaking very slowly, "I own the house on Cedar Avenue. Me, Tessa Langford. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. My money paid the down payment." There was a silence on the other end, but it was not the silence of someone who had made a mistake. It was the silence of someone waiting for a tantrum to pass, so they could get back to the script. "Look, Tess," Jared said, his voice taking on a patronizing, soothing quality that made my skin crawl. "Dad explained this to me. He said you would get emotional about it, but we all know that house is family property. You were just the one with the credit score at the time to get the loan approved. You were holding the title for convenience. It is a family asset. It always has been." "I bought that house 4 years ago," I said. "I used my bonus from the stadium project. I used the savings I scraped together by driving a 10-year-old Honda while you were leasing sports cars you could not afford. Dad did not put a single dime into that property, not one." "That is not how he remembers it," Jared said. "And honestly, does it matter? The deal is done. The money is huge. Tess, it is going to help the family out a lot. You do not want to be the reason Mom and Dad lose this, do you?" "I am not the reason," I snapped. "The reason is that you cannot sell a house you do not own." "Just be there at 11, Jared said, and his voice hardened. "Do not be difficult. For once in your life, just do not make everything a fight." He hung up. I stared at the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The audacity was so physically heavy, I felt like I might sink through the floor. It was not just theft. It was the rewriting of reality. They were looking at my hard work, my late nights, my weekends spent fixing leaky faucets and painting walls, and they were simply erasing it. To them, my success was just a holding place for their potential withdrawals. Before I could even process the rage, the phone rang again. It was my mother, Darla. Of course it was. This was the 1-2 punch, the strategy. Jared breaks the news with blunt force. Darla comes in to smooth the edges with guilt and urgency. I answered. "Mother?" "Oh, Tessa." "Honey," she breathed. Her voice was frantic, breathless, pitched high to simulate distress. "Thank goodness I caught you. Jared said he told you the good news?" "He told me you are trying to sell my house," I said. "Our house, honey, it is all part of the family pot. You know that," she said, brushing past my objection as if it were a fly on her sleeve. "Listen, we need to move fast. The buyer is very particular. He has already wired the funds to Escrow. Can you believe it? $350,000. Cash. It is sitting there right now." "Who is the buyer?" I asked. "What?" "The buyer, Mom. Who is he?" "Oh, just a very nice gentleman," she said. "Very serious. He wants the keys by Friday. He is an investor." "What is his name?" "I do not have the paperwork in front of me. Tessa, why does it matter?" Her sweetness was cracking, revealing the steel underneath. "He is paying cash. That is what matters. Your father has already allocated the funds. We have debts to clear, and we found a beautiful condo in Florida. We put a deposit down yesterday." "You spent the money?" I asked, feeling a cold numbness spreading from my stomach to my limbs. "You spent the money from the sale of my house before I even knew it was for sale?" "We did not spend it. We leveraged it," she corrected, as if using a financial term she barely understood made it legal. "And do not use that tone. You have done well for yourself. You have your big job at the studio. You have your fancy apartment. You do not need that rental. It is just a headache for you. Dealing with tenants. We are doing you a favor. Really, taking it off your hands." "I am the one who manages it," I said. "I am the one who fixes the roof. I am the one who screens the tenants. You have never even stepped foot inside Cedar Avenue since the day I bought it." "And who gave you the confidence to be so independent?" she countered. "Who raised you? Who supported you? You are looking at nickels and dimes. Tessa, when this is about family survival, we are a team. We need you to sign. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock, Harborstone Escrow." "I never agreed to this," I whispered. "You will be there," she said. It was not a question. "Do not embarrass your father. He has already told everyone at the club that he closed a major real estate deal. If you blow this up, you are making him a liar." "He is a liar," I said. "See you at 11, she said, and the line went dead. I lowered the phone and placed it gently on the desk. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a potent cocktail of adrenaline and disbelief. I looked around my office, the framed degrees on the wall, the hard hat hanging on the hook by the door. Everything here I had earned. I had fought for every inch of ground in an industry dominated by men who thought I should be fetching coffee. Not managing million-dollar civic projects, I was meticulous. I was organized. I saved everything. And my family thought I was a prop. That was the realization that hurt more than the potential financial loss. It was the familiarity of the feeling. Since I was a child, anything I achieved was treated as a cute hobby until it became valuable, at which point it became ours. My scholarship? That was our intelligence. My first car? That was our transportation when Jared wrecked my rental property? That was just a toy I was playing with until the adults needed to cash it out. They did not see me as an owner. They saw me as a steward, a temporary custodian of resources that ultimately belonged to Gordon and Darla Langford. I turned my chair and looked out the window again. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the city lights of Port Clayton. "Harborstone Escrow," I said aloud to the empty room. They had a closing scheduled. They had a buyer. They had money wired, which meant they had a contract. A contract requires a seller, and I was the only seller, which meant someone had already signed my name. The numbness evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. This was no longer a family squabble. This was not an argument over Thanksgiving dinner about who paid for the turkey. This was a transaction, a fraudulent, six-figure transaction occurring in the real world, involving banks, title officers, and the county recorder. They thought they were dealing with their daughter, the one who always sighed and capitulated because it was easier than being screamed at. They thought they were dealing with Tessa the doormat. They forgot they were dealing with Tessa Langford, project manager. I reached for my mouse and woke up my computer screens. I did not cry. I did not call Jared back to scream. I did not call my dad to beg for an explanation. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Cedar Audit. Then I opened my email client and my banking portal. If they wanted to treat my life like a business transaction, I would give them the most professional, ruthless audit they had ever seen. They wanted me at the closing table? Fine, I would be there. But I would not be the only one asking questions. I checked the time. It was 10:15 in the morning. I had less than 24 hours before I was scheduled to sign away my future. I picked up my phone again, but not to call family. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled down to H. Mila Hart. She was a real estate attorney who billed $400 an hour and had a reputation for making grown men cry in depositions. We had worked together on a zoning dispute for the library project last year. She was terrifying. I hit the call button. My family thought this was a closing. They had no idea they had just opened a war. I left the office exactly 12 minutes after hanging up with my mother. I did not ask for permission. I simply walked out to my car, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof of my sedan as I navigated the slick streets toward my apartment. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing through a checklist that had nothing to do with library renovations and everything to do with self-preservation. When I reached my apartment, I bypassed the kitchen and went straight to the master bedroom closet. Behind a row of winter coats sat a fireproof safe, bolted to the floor studs. I spun the dial, left to 30, right to 14, left to 82, and listened for the heavy mechanical clunk of the lock disengaging. The smell of old paper and metal wafted out. This was my sanctuary of facts. I pulled out the expanding file labeled Property, Cedar Avenue. I carried it to the dining table and spread the contents out like a general inspecting a battlefield map. There it was, the grant deed. It was printed on heavy, bonded paper. I ran my finger over the recording stamp in the top right corner. It was dated October 14th, 4 years ago. The grantee was listed clearly. Tessa Langford, a single woman. Not Tessa Langford and Gordon Langford, not the Langford Family Trust, just me. I picked up the title insurance policy. The named insured was Tessa Langford. I laid out the tax statements for the last 3 years. Every single one was addressed to me. Every single check used to pay them had been drawn from my personal Chase checking account. I looked at the stack of receipts for the roof repair I had commissioned 2 winters ago when an oak branch came down in a storm. $7,000. I remembered eating instant noodles for 2 months to replenish my emergency fund after writing that check. A memory pushed its way through the wall of red anger in my brain. I was standing in the living room of the Cedar Avenue house the day after I closed on it. The floors were scuffed. The walls were a bilious shade of yellow, and the air smelled of stale tobacco. My father, Gordon, was standing by the window, kicking at a loose piece of baseboard with the toe of his loafer. "You are going to lose your shirt on this dump," he had said, chuckling as if my failure was already a foregone conclusion. "This neighborhood is sliding downhill. Tessa, you are throwing good money after bad. Do not come crying to us when the pipes burst and the tenants stop paying." "It has good bones, Dad," I had replied, clutching a paint roller like a weapon. "The cap rate is solid." "Cap rate," He had scoffed. You read a few books and think you are a tycoon. Just remember, when this goes south, your mother and I are not bailing you out. This is your mess. Your mess. I looked down at the deed on my dining table. 4 years ago, when the house was a risk, it was entirely mine. Now that the market in Port Clayton had exploded and the house was worth nearly double what I paid, suddenly it was family property. The hypocrisy was so sharp it felt like a physical blow to the sternum. They did not want the responsibility of the investment. They only wanted the harvest of the equity. I turned on my laptop. The physical proof was comforting, but the battle was happening in the digital realm. If there was a closing scheduled for tomorrow, there had to be a paper trail. Escrow companies do not operate on telepathy. They send emails. They send wire instructions. They send disclosure packets. I logged into my email. My inbox was clean, mostly work correspondence and newsletters. I typed Harborstone into the search bar. Nothing. I typed escrow. Nothing recent. I frowned. If they were selling the house, they had to provide an email address for the seller. My parents would have used their own email to control the flow of information. But escrow officers are diligent. They often search public records for backup contact information to ensure delivery. I clicked on the spam folder. Buried between an offer for cheap pharmaceuticals and a notification about a winning lottery ticket I never bought, there was an email subject line that made my blood run cold. Subject: Initial opening package. Escrow 222944. 412, Cedar Ave. It had been sent 3 days ago. My hand shook slightly as I clicked it open. The sender was a generic automated system from Harborstone Escrow and Title. The body of the email was standard boilerplate text, thanking the parties for opening escrow and attaching the initial disclosure documents for review. I downloaded the attachment. It was a 40-page PDF. I scrolled past the cover sheet. I scrolled past the privacy policy. I stopped at page 4, the seller information sheet. Under the section labeled Sellers, in handwriting I recognized instantly as my mother's loopy decorative script, were the names Gordon Langford and Darla Langford. Under property address, they had listed Cedar Avenue. But it was the next page that made me stop breathing. It was a copy of the purchase agreement. Standard residential contract. The price was listed as $350,000. The buyer was an LLC I did not recognize, but at the bottom of the page, on the line marked Seller's Signature, there was a scribble. It read Tessa Langford. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. It was a good attempt. To a stranger, it would pass. It had the same sharp incline on the capital T that I used. It had the loop on the L. But the connection between the S and the A was wrong. I never lifted my pen there. This signature had a microscopic break, a hesitation mark where the forger had paused to check their work. And the pressure was all wrong. I sign with a heavy hand. The ink bleeds through to the other side. This looks sketched, tentative. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was not my parents being presumptuous or overstepping boundaries. This was a felony. They had sat at a table, printed out a contract, and someone, probably my mother, given her artistic inclination, had practiced my signature until it was close enough to fool a real estate agent, and then signed my name to sell my property. They had built a comprehensive lie. They had filled out the disclosure forms regarding the condition of the roof, information they only knew because I had told them about the repairs over Sunday dinner. They had listed the current tenant's name, which they must have gotten from the Christmas card I sent last year, where I mentioned the nice couple renting the place. They had weaponized every piece of innocent information I had ever shared with them. I felt a shift inside me, the last remnants of daughterly duty, incinerated in the heat of my rage. This was no longer about family dynamics. This was an attack. I grabbed my external hard drive. I began downloading everything: the spam email, the attachment, the metadata showing when it was received. I took out my phone and photographed the physical deed on my table next to today's newspaper, creating a time-stamped proof of possession. I scanned the tax returns. I scanned the insurance policy. I created a folder in my cloud storage named Fraud Evidence. I uploaded every file. then copied them to the hard drive, and then emailed the zip file to my work address. 3 locations, redundancy. Then I picked up my phone. I did not call the escrow company yet. I needed heavy artillery first. I dialed Mila Hart. Mila was a shark in a tailored suit. We had met when Northbridge Civic Studio faced a frivolous lawsuit over a property line dispute on the library project. Mila had walked into the deposition, placed a single survey map on the table, and eviscerated the opposing counsel in 20 minutes without raising her voice above a conversational murmur. The phone rang twice. "Mila Hart," she answered. Her voice was crisp, efficient, devoid of pleasantries. "Mila, this is Tessa Langford, from Northbridge." "Tessa," she said, her tone softening by a fraction of a degree. "I assume the library permit finally came through?" "No," I said. "This is personal, and I need to hire you immediately, on a retainer, today." There was a beat of silence on the line. Mila shifted instantly from casual acquaintance to counsel. "Tell me." "My parents are scheduled to close on the sale of a rental property tomorrow morning at 11, I said, my voice sounding strangely mechanical to my own ears. "Okay," Mila said. "Are you trying to stop them from selling their property?" "No," I said. "It is not their property. It is mine. Solely in my name. I have the deed in front of me." "I see," Mila said. The temperature in her voice dropped. "And how are they selling a property they do not own?" "I just found a purchase agreement in my spam folder," I said, staring at the screen where the forged signature mocked me. "They forged my signature on the contract. They are listing themselves as the sellers on the information sheet, but they signed my name on the deed transfer documents included in the packet." "Stop," Mila commanded. "Do not speak to them. Have you confronted them?" "They called me an hour ago to tell me to show up and sign the final papers because it was a family asset. They do not know I have seen the forgery." "Good," Mila said. I could hear the click of keys on a keyboard in the background. She was already opening a file. "Tessa, listen to me very carefully. This is not a real estate transaction anymore. This is criminal fraud. If they have a closing scheduled for tomorrow, that means they have likely passed the preliminary title search, which implies they have presented falsified notarizations or power of attorney documents. A standard title search would have flagged the name mismatch immediately unless they provided documentation to bridge that gap. "They asked me to sign a paper 3 years ago," I said, a sudden, sick memory surfacing. "Dad said it was for handling tax correspondence while I was in Europe for that architecture symposium." "Did you sign it?" Mila asked sharply. "Yes. It was just a single page. He said it was an authorization form." "We will get to that later," Mila said. "Right now, we have a fire to put out. If that money moves tomorrow, getting it back will take years. We need to freeze the escrow immediately." "I have all the documents," I said. "The real deed, the tax records, and the fake contract." "Send them to me, now," Mila said. "I am going to draft a cease and desist to the escrow officer and a notice of adverse claim, but I need to know one thing before I pull the trigger. Tessa. Because once I send this letter, there is no unringing the bell. This could result in your parents facing felony charges. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the forged signature again. I thought about the condo in Florida they had already put a deposit on. I thought about Jared's smug voice telling me to just be there. "They scheduled the closing," I said. "They made the choice. Burn it down. Mila." "Tessa," Mila said, her voice cutting through the speakerphone like a scalpel. "I need you to think back very carefully. Before we start throwing legal grenades, I need to know if you handed them the pin. Did you ever, at any point, sign a power of attorney document for your parents?" The question made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the kind of question that shifts the ground beneath your feet. "No," I said instantly. "Never. I know what a power of attorney is. Mila, I would never give anyone that kind of control over my assets." "Not even for a specific event?" she pressed. "Think, when you went to Europe for that architectural symposium 3 years ago, when you were in the hospital for your appendectomy, did you sign anything to let them handle your mail, your taxes, your bills?" I froze. The memory hit me with the force of a physical shove. It was 3 years ago. I was packing for a month-long trip to Berlin and Barcelona. My father had come over to water the plants and pick up the spare key. He had been casual, helpful, almost bored. "Here," he had said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the kitchen counter. "Just sign this authorization so if the IRS or the county sends anything urgent while you are gone, I can pick it up from the post office or discuss it with them. You know how sticklers they are about privacy." It had seemed so mundane, so helpful. I was 29, stressed about missing my flight, and grateful that my dad was willing to deal with bureaucratic headaches so I did not have to. "Oh my God," I whispered. "What?" Mila demanded. 3 years ago, I said, my voice sounding hollow. "I signed a document. Dad called it a general authorization for administrative handling. He said it was strictly for retrieving certified mail and speaking to tax agents if I got audited while I was overseas." "Find it," Mila ordered. "I need to see the wording. If they are using a 3-year-old limited authorization to sell a house, that is a stretch. But if the language is broad enough, a lazy escrow officer might accept it." I dropped the phone on the desk and ran back to the safe. I did not keep my expired papers in the main active folders. I kept them in a shoebox labeled Archive at the very back of the safe. I tore the lid off, old pay stubs, expired warranties, and there, near the bottom, a crisp sheet of paper. I pulled it out. It was not a standard lawyer-drafted power of attorney. It looked like something downloaded from a free legal template site. The title read, "Authorization to Act on Behalf of Principal." I scanned the text. It was terrifyingly vague. I, Tessa Langford, hereby authorize Gordon Langford to act as my agent in matters regarding correspondence, financial queries, and asset management in my absence. It did not say temporary, it did not say for tax purposes only, and right at the bottom, there was my signature, real ink, and next to it, a notary stamp. I looked closer at the stamp. State of Oregon. Commission expires 2024. But the location of the notary was wrong. I live in Port Clayton. My parents live in Port Clayton. But the stamp belonged to a notary in Sheldon, a small town 40 miles south. I had never been to a notary in Sheldon. I had signed this paper in my kitchen. "Mila," I said, picking up the phone again. "I found it. It is bad. But it is also fraudulent. It is notarized. But I was never in front of this notary. I signed it in my kitchen. Dad must have taken it to a buddy of his later to get it stamped." "That is a break in the chain," Mila said, her voice grim. "But it explains how they got this far. They are likely presenting this document to the title company to claim they have the authority to sell. If the escrow officer does not look too closely at the dates or the vague wording, they might process it. Escrow officers are neutral third parties. Tessa, they are not detectives. They look for signatures and stamps. So what do we do?" "I am drafting the demand letter now," Mila said, "but we need to know who exactly is handling this file. Do you have a name?" The spam email was generic. "No name on the email," I said. "Just the company, Harborstone Escrow and Title." "Go to the county recorder's public portal," Mila instructed. "Search your property address. See if there have been any inquiries or preliminary title reports filed in the last 48 hours. Sometimes the diligent officers log the search." I was already typing. The Port Clayton County record system was clunky, a relic of the late 90s, but it was functional. I typed in 412 Cedar Avenue. The screen refreshed. There were my original deed, my mortgage release from when I refinanced, and then, at the very top of the list, a line item dated 2 days ago. "Preliminary title report request. Ref 22944. I clicked the reference number. A pop-up window appeared with the requester's details. Requesting agency. Harborstone Escrow and Title. Agent of record. Caleb Vance. Direct line 503-55-0198. "I got him," I said. "Caleb Vance." "Caleb Vance," Mila repeated. I could hear the recognition in her voice. "Okay, that is interesting." You know him? I have closed a few commercial deals where he was the officer, Mila said. He is young, but he is sharp. He is not the type to rubber stamp a vague 3-year-old document from a notary in Sheldon. He is a stickler for compliance. Is that good or bad? It depends on how good a liar your father is, Mila said. If Caleb is the officer, he might actually listen to you, or he might have already spotted something. Call him, right now, before I send the legal threat. If we can get the escrow officer on our side, it is faster than a court order. What do I say? Tell him the truth, Mila said. Tell him you are the owner. You are alive, you are in town, and you have no idea why your parents are selling your house. I hung up. I stared at the name on the screen. Caleb Vance. This was the man holding the keys to my financial destruction. If he released those funds tomorrow morning, my parents would wire the money to some offshore account or sink it into that Florida condo, and I would be spending the next 5 years suing my own flesh and blood to get back pennies on the dollar. I dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Caleb Vance, Harborstone Escrow, a voice answered. It was a calm, baritone voice, professional, unhurried. It did not sound like the voice of a man who was scrambling to facilitate a fraud. Mr. Vance, I said. I forced my voice to remain steady, channeling every ounce of project management authority I possessed. My name is Tessa Langford. I believe you are handling a file regarding my property at 412 Cedar Avenue. There was a pause, a silence that lasted exactly 2 seconds, but felt like an hour. I expected confusion. I expected him to ask for a file number. I expected him to say, "Oh yes, your father just called." Instead, the tone of his voice shifted. The professional veneer dropped just slightly, replaced by a tone of intense alertness. "Ms. Langford," he said, "I am looking at your file right now. In fact, I was just picking up the receiver to call you." I blinked. "You were calling me?" "Yes," Caleb said. "I have the contact number listed on the seller information sheet here, a landline ending in 4490. That is my parents' house," I said. "I figured," Caleb said, "which is why I did not call it. I pulled your number from the original deed registration from 4 years ago. I wanted to speak to you directly." My grip on the phone loosened just a fraction. This was not the conversation I had rehearsed. I had rehearsed a fight. I was not prepared for an ally. "Why were you calling me, Mr. Vance?" I asked. I could hear him tapping a pen against his desk. It was a rhythmic, thinking sound. "Ms. Langford, in my line of work, we see a lot of standard transactions," Caleb said. "Parents selling for children with power of attorney is not uncommon, but there are irregularities in this file that made me uncomfortable closing tomorrow." "What kind of irregularities?" I asked. Though I already knew the answer, I just needed to hear him say it. I needed to confirm that reality was still objective, that I was not the crazy one. "Well," Caleb began, his voice lowering as if he were sharing a confidence. "First, the power of attorney document provided to us is a copy, not an original wet ink document. That is a flag. Second, the notary stamp on it is from a county that does not match the residence of any party involved. But the main issue, Ms. Langford, is the signature on the purchase agreement." He paused. "Go on," I said. "I compared the signature on the sales contract they submitted this week against the signature on your original deed from 4 years ago." Caleb said, "People's signatures change over time, sure, but the pressure points are inverted. The slant is off by 15 degrees, and frankly, it looks like someone traced it." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen. After an hour of gaslighting from my own family, a stranger in an office across town had looked at a piece of paper and seen the truth. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice trembling slightly before I locked it down. "I did not sign that contract. I did not authorize this sale. My parents are trying to sell my house without my consent." "I suspected as much," Caleb said. Which brings us to the problem. We are scheduled to close at 11 in the morning tomorrow. The buyer has already initiated the wire transfer. The funds are currently sitting in a holding pattern at our clearing bank. You have to stop it, I said. I intend to, Caleb said, but I cannot just stop it on a phone call. I need you to understand what is happening here. This isn't just a canceled deal. If I flag this formally, I am flagging it as criminal fraud. I have a legal obligation to report suspicious activity to the underwriter. Do it, I said. Are you sure? Caleb asked. Once I push this button, the train leaves the station. Your parents listed themselves as the sellers on the intake form. If this is fraud, they are the ones committing it. They know, I said. They know exactly what they are doing. Mr. Vance, I have a lawyer, Mila Hart. She is drafting a notice of adverse claim right now, but I need you to hold that money. Ms. Hart is excellent, Caleb said. If she is involved, that makes my life easier. Okay, here is what we are going to do. I am placing an internal red flag hold on the file immediately. That stops the closing. No money moves, no deed gets recorded. Thank you, I said. But Ms. Langford, Caleb added, his voice sharpening, there is one more thing you should know. The buyer? The one paying cash? Yes. It is an LLC, Caleb said. But when I dug into the operating agreement to verify the signer, standard Patriot Act compliance, I found a name that seemed odd. What name? The managing member of the buying LLC is listed as Jared Langford. The room spun. Jared. My brother was not just the messenger. He wasn't just the one telling me to show up. He is buying it? I asked, my brain struggling to compute the math. Jared does not have $300, let alone $300,000. The funds originated from a hard money lender, Caleb explained. High interest, short term. It looks like a flip strategy. He buys it from you, or rather, your parents pretending to be you, probably at slightly below market value, using a high-interest loan. Then he likely plans to refinance or resell it immediately. It clicked. The whole sick, twisted architecture of the plan fell into place. My parents get the cash to pay their debts and buy their Florida condo. Jared gets the asset, my house, which he then leverages to look like a big-shot real estate investor. And I am left with nothing. Or maybe they plan to give me a small cut later and tell me I should be grateful. He is buying my house with borrowed money, I said, paying my parents and cutting me out completely. It appears so, Caleb said. I am going to need you to come in. Ms. Langford, I need you to verify your identity in person and sign an affidavit stating that the signature on the contract is a forgery. Can you be here in an hour? I will be there in 20 minutes, I said. Bring your ID, Caleb said. And Ms. Langford? Yes? Bring that lawyer. I hung up the phone. The shock was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. I looked at the invisible tax folder on my computer. I looked at the forged documents. They had not just tried to steal my property. They had built a conspiracy. Jared, Mom, Dad, they had all sat down, probably over dinner, and planned how to carve me up like a turkey. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed the file of evidence. I was going to Harborstone, and I wasn't just going to stop a sale. I was going to close the book on the Langford family business. The lobby of Harborstone Escrow and Title was a study in aggressive neutrality, beige walls, beige carpet, and a receptionist who looked like she had been calibrated to smile at exactly 50% intensity. I stood there, dripping rainwater onto the tile, feeling like a live wire in a room full of insulation. Mila Hart was already there. She sat in one of the waiting chairs, typing furiously on her phone. She did not look up when I approached. She simply held up a hand, finished her sentence, and then stood. She was wearing a charcoal suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Deep breath, Mila said, her voice low. We are not here to scream. We are here to record facts. Let the escrow officer lead. I am ready, I said. My voice was steadier than my hands. A door opened behind the reception desk. and a man stepped out. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the elbows. He had the tired, alert eyes of someone who spent his life reading fine print. "Ms. Langford?" he asked. "And Ms. Hart?" "Caleb Vance," Mila said, extending a hand. "Good to see you again." "You too, Mila," Caleb said. He did not smile. "Please, come back to my office." We followed him down a long corridor lined with framed photos of happy couples holding keys to new homes. The images felt mocking now. I wondered how many of those smiling faces concealed a backstory of betrayal. Caleb's office was small and dominated by 2 monitors and stacks of manila folders. He gestured for us to sit, then closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final. "I pulled the physical file," Caleb said, taking a seat behind his desk. He placed a thick folder in the center of the workspace. He did not open it immediately. "Before we look at this, I need to state for the record that our conversation is being noted in the file log. Harborstone takes its fiduciary duty seriously." "We appreciate that," Mila said. "My client is here to clarify ownership of the property at 412 Cedar Avenue." Caleb nodded. He flipped the folder open. "I ran a full title update 20 minutes ago," Caleb said, looking at me. "According to the county recorder, the grant deed recorded 4 years ago lists Tessa Langford, a single woman, as the sole owner. There are no subsequent quitclaim deeds, no trust transfer deeds. As far as the state of Oregon is concerned, you are the only person on this planet with the right to sell that house." "That matches my records," I said. "However," Caleb said, and the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "The sellers, your parents, provided a document to clear the title discrepancy. They submitted it yesterday via courier." He spun a piece of paper around so we could see it. It was titled, "Memorandum of Family Agreement and Beneficial Interest." I stared at it. It was a dense block of legal jargon, referencing code sections I did not recognize, but the gist of the text was clear. It claimed that while I was the record title holder, the equitable interest belonged to Gordon and Darla Langford, and that I had agreed to hold the title merely as a nominee for their benefit. And at the bottom, there was a signature, Tessa Langford. It was dated 2 years ago. Next to it was a notary stamp. "I never signed this," I said. My voice was cold. "I have never even seen this document type before." "I believe you," Caleb said. He tapped the notary stamp with his pen. "Do you see this stamp? It belongs to a notary named Silas Thorne." "I do not know him," I said. "You wouldn't," Caleb said. "He operates out of a strip mall 3 counties over. But that is not the issue. The issue is that Mr. Thorne has been flagged in our internal system. He has had 3 complaints filed against him in the last 18 months for notarizing documents without the signer present. He is currently under investigation by the Secretary of State." Mila leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "So they found a dirty notary." "It looks that way," Caleb said. "But they made a mistake. They used a notary who is already on a watch list. If they had used a clean notary, this might have passed the initial review." I felt a wave of nausea. My father did not just handle paperwork. He went out and found a corrupt official to validate a lie. He hunted for a way to steal from me. "This is not just a family dispute," Mila said, her voice hard. "This is manufacturing evidence." "It gets worse," Caleb said. He turned back to his computer screen. "We need to talk about the money." "The $350,000, I said. "Yes," Caleb said. "The buyer, the LLC managed by your brother, is funding this purchase through a hard money lender called Quick Capital. These lenders do not play by standard bank rules. They move fast. They charge high fees. But they fund in hours, not days." Caleb looked at me, his expression grave. "I just received a notification from our wire department. Quick Capital has already initiated the wire transfer. The full amount is scheduled to hit our Escrow trust account tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Once that money lands, the pressure to record the deed becomes immense. The lender will be screaming for confirmation." "If that deed records," Mila said, "Tessa loses the title. We would have to sue to get it back. And if Jared flips it or encumbers it with more debt, it becomes a legal nightmare. Exactly, Caleb said. Speed is the weapon here. They timed this perfectly. They sent the fake memorandum yesterday to clear the title objections, and they scheduled the funding for tomorrow morning. They wanted to sprint past the finish line before anyone checked the photo finish. Stop it, I said. Caleb nodded. He reached for a red folder on his desk. He pulled out a form labeled Escrow Cancellation and Hold Harmless. I am doing more than stopping it, Caleb said. I am freezing it. But I need to ask you a specific question. Ms. Langford, I need you to answer it clearly because I will be documenting your exact words in the file. He folded his hands on the desk and looked me dead in the eye. Ms. Langford, regarding the sale of 412 Cedar Avenue, did you authorize Gordon Langford, Darla Langford, or Jared Langford to act as your agents, or to negotiate the sale of this property on your behalf? No, I said. Did you sign the purchase agreement dated this week? No. Did you sign the memorandum of beneficial interest dated 2 years ago? No. Do you consent to the sale of this property? Absolutely not, I said. I am the owner. I am not selling. Caleb exhaled. It was a long, slow release of breath. He picked up his pen and wrote, "Denied" in large block letters across the top of his notes. Okay, Caleb said. Then what we have here is no longer a transaction. It is an attempted transaction fraud. Hearing a stranger say it made it real. Fraud. I am triggering a compliance hold, Caleb said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. I am locking the file. No money in, no money out. I will notify the lender that the escrow is suspended pending an internal investigation into title validity. That will stop the wire. Lenders like Quick Capital run for the hills the second they smell fraud. What about my parents? I asked. What happens when they show up tomorrow at 11? They will not be meeting with me, Caleb said. They will be met by our branch manager and handed a notification that the escrow has been canceled due to inability to verify seller authority. We do not give them details. We just shut the door. They will call me, I said. They will come for me. Let them, Mila said, because now we have the leverage. Caleb, can we get copies of everything in that file? The fake memorandum, the purchase agreement, the wire instructions? I can provide you with everything submitted by the sellers, Caleb said. Since you are the legal owner, you have a right to see the file. I will print a full package for you right now. He stood up and walked to the large printer in the corner of the office. The machine whirred to life, spitting out page after page of my family's betrayal. I watched the paper stack up. 10 pages, 20 pages, 50 pages. Every sheet was a brick in the wall they had built to shut me out of my own life. They had not just hoped I would agree. They had constructed a reality where I did not exist as an autonomous person. In their version of the story, I was just a signature they could forge, a name they could use, a placeholder. Caleb handed me the thick stack of warm paper. I am sorry you are going through this, Caleb said, and for the first time, his professional mask slipped, revealing genuine pity. I have seen families fight over money before, but I have never seen parents try to sell a child's house out from under them with this level of coordination. They needed the money, I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. They bet everything on this closing. Well, Caleb said, sitting back down, they just lost the bet. Mila stood up. Thank you. Caleb, we will take it from here. I will be sending over a formal preservation letter. Do not destroy any digital logs. I won't, Caleb promised. We walked out of the office. The lobby was still beige. The receptionist was still smiling at 50%, but the world had changed. We stepped outside into the rain. The cold air hit my face, sharp and biting. You did good, Mila said. We stopped the bleeding. We did not just stop it, I said, clutching the stack of papers against my chest to keep them dry. We trapped them. What do you mean? They spent the money, I said. Mom told me they put a deposit on a condo in Florida. Jared borrowed money from a hard money lender to fund the buy. They have made financial commitments based on this money hitting their accounts tomorrow. Mila looked at me. When that wire gets rejected, the dominoes fall. Yes, I said. They bet my future on a lie. Now they have to pay the house. I looked at my phone. It was almost noon. In 23 hours. My parents would walk into this building expecting a check for $350,000. Instead, they would find a locked door. And I would be waiting. Mila, I said, I want to file the police report. Today. Mila nodded. Let's go. But Tessa, once we do that, there is no going back to Thanksgiving dinners. I laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. They sold me for cash. Mila, I said. I do not think they were planning on inviting me to dinner anyway. I unlocked my car. The file lay on the passenger seat, heavy and accusing. I put the car in gear. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the peacekeeper. I was the owner, and it was time to evict them from my life. I did not go back to work. I could not sit in a meeting about library acoustics while my own life was being dismantled. Instead, I went home, brewed a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint, and sat down at my dining table. The silence in the apartment was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with the ghosts of 1,000 conversations I had let slide, 1,000 moments where I had bitten my tongue, smiled, and allowed my family to rewrite history because it was easier than fighting. We are so proud of our investment, Dad would say to his golf buddies, pointing at a picture of my house. Tessa is just the property manager, Mom would whisper to her church friends. I had always called it keeping the peace. Now, staring at the stack of documents Caleb had given me, I realized it had a different name. It was a tax, an emotional, financial, and psychological tax. I paid for the privilege of being related to the Langfords. I opened a new spreadsheet on my laptop. I did not name it evidence. I named it the invisible tax. I started typing. Item 1. Roof repair. November 2020. I remembered that winter. The rain had been relentless. Water was dripping into the tenant's bedroom. I had called my father, panicked, asking if he knew a roofer. You bought a money pit, Tessa. He had laughed, the sound of a football game blaring in the background. Figure it out. Don't stress us with your bad decisions. I had figured it out. I found the contractor. I supervised the work. I wrote the check for $7,200 from my savings. In the invisible tax file, I logged the date, the cost, and the quote from my father. Then, next to it, I pasted a screenshot of a text message from my mother sent 2 months later. Dad told Uncle Walt how we fixed up the rental. It looks great. Item 2. Tenant acquisition. March 2022. The previous tenants had moved out. I spent 3 weeks scrubbing floors, repainting walls, and running open houses. I interviewed 15 applicants. I ran the credit checks. When I finally signed the lease with the current tenants, a lovely young couple, my brother Jared had sent me a text. Dad says you finally got someone in there. About time. Make sure you don't spend all the rent money on shoes. I logged the 60 hours of labor I had put into that turnover. Value? Priceless. Family credit given? 0. I worked for 3 hours. The list grew. Property taxes paid. Insurance premiums negotiated. Plumbing emergencies handled at 2 a.m. Every single line item was a concrete example of my ownership, and every single associated memory was an example of their dismissal. By the time I finished, the sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the room. I wasn't sad anymore. I was an auditor, and I had found a massive discrepancy in the books. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mila. I need the bulletproof vest. Tessa, don't just send me PDFs. I need a physical binder of evidence that we can slam onto a judge's desk if this goes to court. Deeds, tax statements, insurance, everything certified if possible. I looked at the message. Certified. Most people would have waited until the next morning, but I knew the county clerk's office had a satellite kiosk in the mall that stayed open until 8 p.m. on Thursdays. I grabbed my coat. I spent the next 2 hours standing in line under fluorescent lights, paying expedited fees. I requested certified copies of every recorded document related to 412 Cedar Avenue. You need 3 copies? The clerk asked, looking at me over her glasses. I need them stamped, I said. I need the raised seal. I need them to look official enough to scare a con artist. When I got home, I did not just staple them. I own a thermal binding machine, a relic from my architecture school days. I printed out cover sheets on heavy cardstock. I organized the documents chronologically. Exhibit A, the original grant deed. Exhibit B, proof of funds for down payment. My bank statements, highlighted. Exhibit C, 4 years of property tax payments, clearing from my account. Exhibit D, the hazard insurance policy, listing only Tessa Langford. I made 2 identical booklets. They were thick, heavy, and undeniable. They looked like the kind of reports that end careers. But I wasn't done. I needed to process the digital files Caleb had given me. I plugged in the flash drive containing the seller package my parents had submitted to Harborstone. I had skimmed it in Caleb's office, but now I was going to dissect it. I opened the folder labeled Identification. Caleb had said my parents provided ID. I assumed they had submitted their own driver's licenses, which would be standard if they were claiming to be the sellers. I clicked on a file named ID Verification Seller TL PDF. The image opened on my screen, and I felt the air leave the room. It was a driver's license. It had my name, Tessa Marie Langford. It had my date of birth. It had my height and eye color. But the photo was a blurry, high-contrast disaster. It looked like it had been photocopied 10 times. You could tell it was a woman with dark hair, but the features were indistinguishable. It could have been me. It could have been my cousin. It could have been a random woman from the internet. And then I looked at the address field. 1505, Oak Ridge Lane, Port Clayton, or. That was not my address. That was my parents' address. I sat back, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. This was not just a forgery of a signature. This was the creation of a false identity. If they had used my real license, the escrow company would have mailed the closing documents to my apartment. My parents could not risk that. They needed to control the mail. So, they, or someone helping them, had created a fake ID using my personal details but their address, and then deliberately degraded the image quality so the escrow officer would not notice the photo didn't quite match the woman standing in front of him, or so they could claim bad scan quality if asked. But wait, my parents are not tech-savvy. My father types with 2 fingers. My mother thinks the cloud is a literal weather phenomenon. They could not have photoshopped a driver's license to look this authentic, even with the blur. The fonts were correct. The layout was the current Oregon standard. Someone had made this for them. I zoomed in on the metadata of the PDF. Created, Monday, 9:45 p.m. Software, Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. Author, J. Lang Consulting. J. Lang. Jared. My brother, the entrepreneur, who had failed at 3 startups and was currently consulting, the brother who had told me to just show up and sign. He hadn't just found the lender. He had manufactured the fake ID. The betrayal did not deepen. It solidified. It hardened into something resembling concrete. My brother had used his graphic design skills I had paid for by buying him a laptop for college, to help our parents steal my home. I looked at the clock. It was 10 at night. I opened my email client. I composed a new message. To Caleb Vance, Harborstone Escrow. CC, Mila Hart, Attorney at Law. Compliance at Harborstone, subject urgent. Evidence of identity fraud. Escrow 22944. I attached the certified documents I had scanned. I attached the screenshot of the fake ID metadata. I began to type. Dear Mr. Vance, further to our conversation today, please find attached certified proof of my sole ownership of the property at 412 Cedar Avenue. These documents effectively nullify any claim made by the fraudulent sellers. However, I am also attaching a document found within your own file. The seller identification PDF. Please note that the address listed on this ID is not my legal residence. It is the residence of Gordon and Darla Langford. Furthermore, the metadata indicates this document was created by a user named J. Lang, my brother, Jared Langford, who is also the managing member of the buying entity. This confirms that the buyer and the seller are conspiring to defraud the title holder. This is not a clerical error. This is a premeditated manufacturing of false identification to redirect official correspondence. I am formally requesting that you preserve this specific file and its metadata for the police report I will be filing tomorrow morning. Regards, Tessa Langford. I hit send. The swoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I closed the laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked streets of Port Clayton. I thought about my parents, probably sitting in their living room right now, clinking wine glasses, toasting to their big deal closing tomorrow. They were probably discussing what color to paint the walls of the Florida condo. They were probably telling themselves that they were doing me a favor, that they were managing the family wealth. They had no idea that the quiet, obedient Tessa had just launched a tactical nuke into their inbox. But as the adrenaline faded, a new question surfaced, a colder, sharper question. Jared could use Photoshop. Yes, but Jared was sloppy. He was lazy. He wouldn't know which specific title company to use, or how to draft a memorandum of beneficial interest that sounded legal enough to pass a quick glance. He wouldn't know about the specific notary in Sheldon who was willing to bend the rules. The memorandum was full of legal codes. The seller package was organized with a precision that my chaotic family lacked. Jared was the muscle. Mom and Dad were the face. But who was the brain? Someone had guided them. Someone had told them, if you want to sell Tessa's house, you need to create a paper trail that predates the sale. You need a memorandum. You need a fake ID with your address so the checks come to you. I went back to the invisible tax file. I scrolled down to the bottom and added a new header. The accomplices. I typed Jared Langford and put a checkmark next to it. Then I typed unknown legal advisor. I stared at the blinking cursor. My family was not smart enough to pull this off alone, and that terrified me more than the theft itself, because it meant that somewhere out there, a professional was profiting from their greed. I picked up my phone and texted Mila one last time for the night. We need to look at the notary again, Silas Thorne, and I need to know who prepared the memorandum. This isn't just my parents being greedy. Someone gave them a playbook. Mila replied instantly, "Get some sleep. Tessa, tomorrow is demolition day. We will find the architect of the scheme after the building falls down." I turned off the lights in the apartment. I lay in bed, listening to the rain. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, visualizing the moment the wire transfer would bounce. I wondered if my mother would cry. I wondered if my father would scream. I realized I didn't care. I closed my eyes and finally let myself feel the weight of the invisible tax lifting off my shoulders. I was done paying. Tomorrow, I started collecting. Day 1. The stop order. The morning the closing was supposed to happen, I did not go to the office. I sat in Mila Hart's conference room, drinking lukewarm water from a paper cup, watching the clock tick toward 11 in the morning. At 9:30, Mila walked in holding a single sheet of paper. It was still warm from the printer. "It is done," she said, sliding the document across the polished mahogany table. It was a temporary restraining order, signed by a judge at the County Superior Court just 45 minutes prior. Mila had argued ex parte, meaning she went in without the other side present, because the risk of irreparable financial harm and fraud was imminent. She had shown the judge the 2 signatures, the real one on my deed and the traced, shaky one on the purchase agreement. The judge had signed it immediately. "This order prohibits the transfer, encumbrance, or sale of the property at 412 Cedar Avenue," Mila explained, her voice calm and clinical. "We just served it electronically to Harborstone Escrow and physically to the county recorder's office. Even if Caleb Vance wanted to close this deal, which he does not, he legally cannot. The property is now radioactive." I looked at the paper. It was just text, but it felt like a shield. For the first time in 4 days, my heart rate dropped below 100. "What happens at 11 o'clock?" I asked. "Nothing," Mila said. "The room will be empty. The money will stay in the wire queue until it is rejected, and your parents will receive a phone call from the escrow manager telling them there is a title defect that prevents closing." "Just a title defect?" "For now," Mila said. "We do not show them the fraud card yet. We let them panic. We let them wonder which part of their plan failed." Day 2. The buyer blinks. The panic did not take long to set in. By the afternoon of the second day, the silence broke. But it was not my parents calling, it was the buyer. Technically, the buyer was the LLC my brother Jared managed, but the entity with the real power was Quick Capital, the hard money lender providing the funds. Hard money lenders are not banks, they are sharks. They do not care about family drama. They care about collateral. Mila called me at 2 in the afternoon. "We just got a communication from the attorney representing the buyer's side," she said. "It seems Quick Capital got wind of the restraining order. They are furious." "What are they saying?" "They are claiming they were misled about the title status," Mila said. "They are demanding the immediate return of their wire transfer. They are pulling the funding. The deal is dead. Tessa, even if you wanted to sell the house right now, there is no money. The lender has fled the scene." I felt a grim satisfaction. Jared had probably promised them an easy, clean flip. Instead, he had handed them a lawsuit waiting to happen. "And Jared?" I asked. "Is he asking for his deposit back?" "That is the interesting part," Mila said. "The LLC put down a $10,000 earnest money deposit. Usually, if the seller fails to perform, the buyer gets that back. But since we are alleging that the buyer, your brother, was complicit in the fraud, we are freezing that deposit too. We are holding it as potential damages." Jared was out 10 grand. That money probably came from his maxed out credit cards. The vice was tightening. Day 3. The compliance report. On the third day, the professional verdict arrived. Caleb Vance sent over a secure PDF. It was the official internal compliance report from Harborstone Escrow and Title. I read it in my living room, and the language was devastatingly bureaucratic. It did not use emotional words. It used legal absolutes. Incident report: potential identity theft and unauthorized transaction. Subject property: 412 Cedar Avenue. The report detailed the timeline. It noted the receipt of the seller information sheet on Tuesday. It noted the IP address of the sender, but the paragraph that mattered was near the bottom. Findings: the individuals identified as Gordon and Darla Langford represented themselves as the legal owners of the subject property. They completed and signed the affidavit of identity and ownership under penalty of perjury. A review of public records confirms they hold no legal title. The submission of these documents constitutes a material misrepresentation of facts to an escrow officer. "Penalty of perjury," I whispered to the empty room. They had not just lied to me, they had lied to the state. They had signed a federal form declaring they were the owners. In the eyes of the law, this was no longer a family misunderstanding. It was a crime. I printed the report and added it to my invisible tax binder. It was the heaviest piece of paper yet. Day 4. The call. I knew it was coming. The shock had worn off. The confusion had faded. And now the reality had set in. The money was not coming. My phone rang at 4:15 in the afternoon. The caller ID said Dad. I stared at it. My hands did not shake this time. I pressed the record button on my external voice recorder. Oregon is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, a fact Mila had drilled into me, and picked up. "Hello?" I said. "You," my father's voice rasped. He sounded breathless, like he had been running or screaming. "You little saboteur." "Hello, Dad?" I said. "Do not hello dad me," he snapped. The veneer of the benevolent patriarch was gone. "You stopped the sale. The escrow officer said there was a legal injunction filed by a lawyer named Hart. That is your lawyer, isn't it?" "Yes," I said. "Mila Hart represents me." "You have no right," he shouted. The distortion on the line crackled. "You have absolutely no right to interfere in my business dealings. That sale was done. The money was there. Do you know what you have done? You have humiliated us. I have people waiting on that money. I have commitments." "I have no right?" I repeated, my voice steady, cool, contrasting sharply with his heat. "Dad, whose name is on the deed?" "It is family property," he roared. "It does not matter whose name is on the damn paper. I told you to buy it. I guided you. That makes it ours. You are just the vessel. Tessa, you are just the placeholder." "I am the owner," I said. "And you forged my signature. You and Mom signed an affidavit stating you were the owners. You committed perjury." "We did what was necessary," he yelled. "Because you are too selfish to do what is right for the family. You would let your parents drown just to keep your little rental income. We raised you better than this." "You did not raise me to be a felon," I said. "And that is what you are now. Dad, you tried to sell a house you do not own." "Fix this," he commanded. "Call your lawyer. Lift the order. We can still salvage the deal with the lender if we move fast. If you do not, Tessa, I swear to God, you are no daughter of mine." I did not break the deal. "Dad," I said, leaning back in my chair, "you signed a paper claiming you were the owner. You wanted to play the big-shot real estate mogul? Well, congratulations. You just played yourself into a fraud investigation. Do you want me to pretend I did not see it?" "You ungrateful—" I hung up. I saved the recording. I labeled it Coercion Attempt Day 4. Day 5. The Threat. They realized screaming would not work, so they hired a suit. On Day 5, Mila forwarded me a letter attached to an email. It was from a lawyer named Arthur Blanton. I looked him up. He was a general practice attorney who mostly handled DUIs and divorces in a strip mall near my parents' house. The letter was a masterpiece of desperation. "Dear Ms. Hart, we represent Gordon and Darla Langford. It has come to our attention that your client, Ms. Tessa Langford, has wrongfully interfered with a valid real estate transaction. While the deed may currently be in your client's name, our clients assert that there was a verbal contract, an oral agreement, made 4 years ago, wherein Ms. Langford agreed to hold the title in trust for her parents, granting them full management and disposition rights. By stopping the sale, your client is in breach of this oral contract. We demand the immediate release of the injunction, or we will be forced to sue for specific performance and damages." Mila called me 10 minutes after sending it. She was laughing. "The oral contract defense," she said. "It is the last refuge of the scoundrel." "Is it valid?" I asked. "In real estate?" Mila scoffed. "There is a thing called the statute of frauds. It is a fundamental legal principle that says any contract for the sale of land must be in writing to be enforceable. An oral agreement to sell a house is worth less than the paper this letter is printed on. They are bluffing. Tessa, they are trying to scare you into backing down." "It won't work," I said. Day 6. The bluff called. Mila sent the response on the morning of Day 6. It was 2 sentences long. "Mr. Blanton, please provide any physical evidence of this alleged agreement, emails, text messages, or written correspondence, by 5 o'clock today. If none is provided, we will consider your letter an admission that no such written authority exists." 5 o'clock came and went. No emails, no texts, no recordings. Because the agreement never happened. The understanding they claimed existed was entirely in their heads, a byproduct of their entitlement, not a legal reality. The silence from their side was deafening. It was the sound of a bluff collapsing. Day 7. The slip. The pressure was building, and the weakest vessel cracked first. On the evening of the 7th day, my phone buzzed with a text from Jared. He didn't call. He was too cowardly for that. "Jared, T, you need to stop this. Seriously, Mom is a mess. Dad is not sleeping." I didn't reply. "Jared, you don't understand how bad this is. They already spent the money." I stared at the screen. I typed back, carefully. "Me, How could they spend money they didn't have yet? Jared. They took out a bridge loan. High interest. They used it to put the down payment on the Florida place and pay off Dad's credit cards. They were going to pay back the bridge loan with the house money on Friday. Now the bridge loan is due, and they have nothing. The interest is compounding daily. I let out a low whistle. This was the other thing. They hadn't just counted their chickens before they hatched. They had borrowed money to buy the feed for the unhatched chickens. They had leveraged themselves to the hilt, assuming I would just roll over. Me. That sounds like a them problem. Jared. It is going to be a you problem when they lose their house. They put their own house up as collateral for the bridge loan. I stopped breathing for a second. They had bet their own home, the house I grew up in, on the certainty that they could steal mine. Jared, if you don't release the sale, the bridge lender forecloses on Mom and Dad. You are going to make them homeless. I looked at the text. It was meant to crush me with guilt. It was meant to make me run to Mila and say, "Stop, I can't do this to them." But all I saw was the magnitude of their gambling addiction. They had risked everything, my asset, their home, our relationship, on a lie. I took a screenshot of the text. I forwarded it to Mila with a note. Motive established, financial desperation. They are not just greedy, they are insolvent. I was not going to save them. If I saved them now, they would learn nothing. They would just find another way to bleed me dry next year. Let the bridge lender foreclose, I said to the empty room. I was done building bridges for people who only use them to set fire to my life. The documentary of their downfall was writing itself, day by day, and I was no longer the victim. I was the witness. The conference room in Mila's office felt less like a place of business and more like a surgical theater. The air conditioning was set to a chill 68 degrees. The mahogany table was bare except for a pitcher of water and a court reporter's stenotype machine, which clicked softly like a mechanical insect. We were not in court yet, but this was the precursor. Mila had subpoenaed the witnesses my parents had listed in their lawyer's blustering letter, my Aunt Sharon and Uncle Walt. They had been dragged here under penalty of contempt to give a deposition. They sat on the opposite side of the table, looking small. Uncle Walt, usually the loudmouth at Thanksgiving who bragged about his glory days in sales, was sweating through his dress shirt. Aunt Sharon kept twisting her handbag strap around her fingers until her knuckles turned white. They had expected a family intervention. They had walked into a legal interrogation. Mila did not smile. She did not offer them coffee. She simply adjusted her glasses and looked at Uncle Walt. "Mr. Langford," Mila began, her voice devoid of warmth. "You are under oath. You understand that lying in this deposition carries the same penalty as lying to a judge in a courtroom?" "I understand," Walt muttered. "Your brother, Gordon Langford, claims that there was a verbal agreement made 4 years ago regarding the property at 412 Cedar Avenue. He claims you were present when my client, Tessa Langford, agreed to hold the title merely as a nominee for her parents. Is this true?" Walt shifted in his chair. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes for me to stop this. I stared back, my face a mask of stone. "Well," Walt said, clearing his throat, "I mean, it was understood. We were at a barbecue. Gordon was talking about how he found this great investment property and how he was going to use Tessa's credit to get it, because his debt-to-income ratio was a little high at the time. We all knew the plan." "I am not asking what you knew or what the plan was," Mila interrupted, her voice sharpening. "I am asking about the specific actions of my client. Did you, personally, hear Tessa Langford say the words, 'I agree to hold this title for my parents'?" Walt blinked. "Well, Gordon said she was on board." "Hearsay," Mila said, waving a hand dismissively. "I am asking what you heard Tessa say. Did she agree? Did she nod? Did she shake hands on it?" "She was over by the grill," Walt admitted, his voice dropping. "Gordon was talking to me and your dad by the cooler, but he told us she was fine with it." "So," Mila said, leaning forward, "you never heard Tessa agree to anything. You only heard Gordon claim she agreed." "It's a family thing," Walt argued weakly. You don't write contracts for everything in a family. In the state of Oregon, when $350,000 of real estate is involved, you absolutely do, Mila countered. She turned to Aunt Sharon. Mrs. Langford, you stated in your affidavit that Tessa always knew the house belonged to her parents. On what do you base this assertion? Sharon looked like she might cry. Gordon and Darla always called it our rental. They talked about the rent checks like it was their income. Tessa never corrected them in front of us. Did Tessa ever give them the rent money? Mila asked. I don't know the banking details, Sharon stammered. Let me clarify the banking details for you, Mila said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. These are 4 years of bank statements. Every single rent check went into Tessa's account. Every single repair bill came out of Tessa's account. Gordon and Darla never received a dime. Did you know that? Sharon stared at the papers. No, Gordon said he was letting her keep a management fee. A management fee of 100%? Mila asked dryly. That is a very generous fee. The room fell silent. The narrative my parents had spun for the extended family, that I was just a helpful daughter managing their asset, was dissolving under the harsh light of facts. Mila closed her folder. She looked at both of them. Here is the reality, she said. You witnessed nothing. You heard Gordon bragging. You heard Darla wishing. But you never saw a contract, and you never heard my client consent to give away her property. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. Silence is not a transfer of ownership, Mila said, and relying on hearsay to help someone commit fraud makes you an accessory. If you repeat these lies in court, we will pursue perjury charges against you as well. Uncle Walt stood up. We are done here. I am not going to jail for Gordon's schemes. He grabbed Sharon's arm and practically dragged her out of the room. They didn't look at me as they left. They knew. They had always known, deep down, that my parents were liars. They just hadn't cared until the consequences threatened them. I let out a long breath. That went well? It went perfectly, Mila said. Their witness list just evaporated. Now, let's check your email. Caleb sent something while we were grilling them. I opened my laptop. There was a new message from Caleb Vance, marked high priority. Subject: Forensic analysis of signature 412 Cedarevs. I clicked it open. Tessa, Mila, I sent the digital file of the purchase agreement to our fraud detection vendor. I wanted to know why the signature looked traced, but also so clean. The results just came back. It is not a wet signature. It is not even a scanned wet signature. The signature is a vector image. The analysis shows 0 pixelation at 300% zoom, but perfect pixelation at the edges where it meets the PDF background. This means the signature was created on a high-resolution touch device, likely an iPad or a stylus tablet, and then stamped onto the PDF using editing software. More importantly, the timestamps embedded in the PDF metadata show the signature was applied on Sunday, the 12th, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I froze. Sunday the 12th. I looked at the calendar on the wall. That was last week. I closed my eyes, and the memory played back like a movie reel. I was at my apartment. It was raining. The buzzer had rung. It was Jared. He had come over, looking disheveled, claiming his internet was down and he needed to send a resume for a huge consulting gig. Can I just use your laptop for 10 minutes? Tea? The Wi-Fi at Starbucks is garbage. I had let him in. I had made him tea. I had unlocked my laptop, my personal MacBook Pro, and left him at the dining table while I went to fold laundry in the bedroom. He had been there for 20 minutes. I remembered coming back out. He was closing the lid, looking flushed but happy. Thanks, sis. You're a lifesaver. I think this resume is going to get me the job. He hadn't sent a resume. He had accessed my files. He had probably found an old PDF with my signature, maybe a lease agreement or a tax form, and used his stylus on his iPad to trace it, or simply copy-pasted a high-res version he created right there, or perhaps he had asked to borrow my iPad to check his email while the laptop was updating. He was in my apartment, I whispered. The violation felt physical, like he had broken a window. Jared, he came over last Sunday. He used my Wi-Fi. He used my devices. Mila looked up from her notes. Her eyes were hard. He had access to your digital signature? He had access to everything, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I trusted him. He is my brother. I gave him the password. That is how they did it, Mila said. They didn't just forge it. They stole it. That is identity theft involving a computer system. That is a federal crime. He pasted it, I said, looking at the email again. He literally copy-pasted my consent. Mila grabbed her phone. I am updating the complaint. We are not just asking for a restraining order anymore. I am requesting a subpoena for Jared Langford's electronic devices, his laptop, his tablet, his phone. We will find the source file of that signature, and when we do, we will have the metadata proving he created the forgery. Do it, I said. 30 minutes later, the email notification of the subpoena request went out to the opposing counsel, Mr. Blanton. 10 minutes after that, my phone rang. It was Jared. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. I picked up. This call is being recorded, I said instantly. Tessa, please. Jared's voice was high, cracking with panic. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. You have to stop Mila. Blanton just called me. He says you guys are asking for my laptop, my hard drives. We are, I said. You can't do that, Jared screamed. I have personal stuff on there. You can't just seize my property. You tried to seize my house, I said. Fair is fair. Tessa, listen to me, he pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. If they look at my computer, they are going to find the files. They are going to see the edits. I know, I said. That is the point. You don't understand, he cried. That is a felony, Tessa. I could go to prison. I am your brother. You are going to send your own brother to prison over a house? I am not sending you to prison, I said, my voice cold and steady. You sent yourself to prison the moment you walked into my apartment last Sunday and decided to steal my identity. I didn't want to, Jared sobbed. Dad made me. He said it was the only way. He said you were being difficult, and we just needed to help the process along. He told me it wasn't a big deal, that you would thank us later when the family had money again. I just did what he told me. You are 36 years old, Jared, I said. Dad didn't hold a gun to your head. You have a law degree you never use. You knew exactly what you were doing. He promised me $50,000, Jared blurted out. The line went silent. There it was, the price tag on our sibling bond. $50,000, I repeated. That is what I am worth to you? That is the price for betraying me? I have debts. Tessa, you don't know what it's like. You have your big job and your perfect credit. I am drowning. I just needed a win. You didn't do this because you were following Dad, I said, and my voice felt like it was cutting through steel. You didn't do this out of loyalty. You did it for the payout. You sold me out for a cut of the profits. Tessa, please. You are not a victim, Jared, I said. You are a co-conspirator, and unlike Mom and Dad, you actually possess the technical skills to execute the fraud, which means you are going to be the one the prosecutor looks at the hardest. Don't do this, he whispered. I am not doing anything, I said. I am just handing over the evidence. If you want to stay out of jail, Jared, I suggest you stop talking to me and start talking to a criminal defense attorney, because Arthur Blanton represents Mom and Dad. He does not represent you. I hung up. I sat there in the conference room, staring at the phone. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from the sheer, exhausting realization that I had shared a womb with a man who would sell my future for $50,000. Mila looked at me. She didn't say anything. She just nodded. He admitted it, I said. He admitted the bribe. He admitted the forgery. Did the recorder catch it? Every word. Then we have them, Mila said. The witnesses are gone. The technical evidence is solid. And now we have a confession. It doesn't feel like a win, I said quietly. It never does in family court, Mila said, but it is survival. And right now, Tessa, you are the last one standing. I looked at the rain streak against the window. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one destroying the Langford household. And I was the one controlling the lightning. The machinery of the state does not move with the speed of a furious father or a panicked brother. It moves with the slow, crushing inevitability of a glacier. 2 days after Jared's confession, the Oregon Real Estate Agency and the local district attorney's office formally accepted the file. It was no longer a dispute. It was case number 49221, State vs. Investigation of Fraudulent Conveyance. When the official letters arrived at my parents' house, certified mail, return receipt requested, the silence broke. But it did not break with an apology. It broke with a chaotic, desperate noise that sounded like a drowning animal thrashing in the water. My phone began to light up, not with calls from lawyers, but with calls from the house phone I had grown up with. I did not answer. I let every single call roll to voicemail. The first 3 messages were from my father. They were short, sharp barks of command. Pick up the phone, Tessa. You are blowing this out of proportion. Call me back immediately, or do not bother coming home for Christmas. I listened to them in my office, drinking cold coffee, feeling absolutely nothing. The threats felt hollow, like a dog barking from behind a very high, very thick glass wall. Then came the shift. By the afternoon, the tone changed. My mother, Darla, took over. Her first voicemail was 2 minutes long. Tessa, honey, she began, and her voice was thick with tears. It was the specific tone she used when she wanted to return a dress she had already worn, a mix of victimhood and sweet confusion. Please, just pick up. We are so scared. The police called. Tessa, they mentioned jail. You cannot let them do this to your father. He has a heart condition. You know his blood pressure. I didn't know about any heart condition, but I knew about his high cholesterol from eating too much steak. We did not mean to hurt you, the voicemail continued. It was just a misunderstanding. We were going to pay you back. We just needed to move the money around to save the family. We are in trouble, Tessa. Financial trouble. We did it for all of us. Please, tell the lawyer to stop. Tell them it was just a mistake. Tell them we had your permission. Please. To save the family. That phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone. It was the ultimate trump card. In the Langford house. The family was a deity that required constant sacrifice, and I was always the lamb on the altar. But Mila Hart had taught me to trust paper, not tears. Come to my office, Mila texted me an hour later. We found out what they were saving. I drove to Mila's firm. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky a bruised purple color. When I walked into the conference room, Mila was standing by the window. On the table lay a glossy brochure and a stack of printouts. Your mother said they needed the money to save the family, Mila said, turning to face me. She implied they were drowning in debt, right? That they were about to lose their house? That is what Jared said, I replied. He said they took out a bridge loan against their home to pay off debts, and they needed my house sale to cover the bridge loan. That is partially true, Mila said. They did take out a bridge loan, a high-interest, short-term loan of $50,000, but they didn't use it to pay off credit cards or medical bills. She slid the glossy brochure across the table. It was for a development called the Azure Coast in Sarasota, Florida. The cover featured a couple in white linen clinking champagne glasses on a balcony overlooking a turquoise ocean. They used the bridge loan to put a non-refundable down deposit on Unit 402, Mila said. It is a luxury 2-bedroom condo in a resort community, golf course access, private beach club, concierge service. The price tag is $600,000. I stared at the brochure. The people in the photo looked so happy. They looked rich. They weren't paying off debt, I whispered. They were upgrading. They were buying a retirement paradise, Mila corrected. The closing date for the Florida condo was scheduled for exactly 3 days after the closing of your rental property. They needed your $350,000 cash to make the heavy down payment required to secure the mortgage on the Florida place, since their income creates a debt ratio issue. They were going to take my house, I said, feeling a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. Sell it, leave me with nothing, and move to a resort in Florida? Yes, Mila said. And the saving the family line? That was just to guilt you into compliance if you found out. There was no emergency. Tessa, there was just greed. They wanted to retire in style, and they decided your asset was their ticket. I looked at the brochure. I imagined my mother telling her friends about her new place on the coast. I imagined my father driving a golf cart. They were willing to commit a felony, destroy my credit, and steal my life's work not to survive, but to buy a lifestyle they felt entitled to. It gets clearer, Mila said. The lender for the buyer, Quick Capital, officially pulled out an hour ago. They sent a formal termination of the transaction, and because they want to avoid being named as co-conspirators in a fraud case, their legal team provided us with the entire email chain between their loan officer and the sellers. Mila opened a folder. You need to read this. She handed me a printed email thread. It was dated 2 weeks ago. From Gordon Langford to Steve, Quick Capital Loan Officer. Subject, re-title issues. Steve, don't worry about the title showing the daughter's name. That is just a formality we set up for tax reasons years ago. I control the asset. She is aware of the sale. She is a good girl. She does what she is told. I will handle the signatures. You just get the wire ready. She is just the pen. I am the hand. I read the line again. She is just the pen. I am the hand. I felt the air leave my lungs. For years, I had told myself they loved me in their own broken way. I told myself they were just old-fashioned, or controlling, or difficult. I thought they saw me as a daughter, maybe a disappointing one, maybe a stubborn one, but a person. I was wrong. To Gordon Langford, I was not a person. I was not an investor. I was not a project manager. I was a pen. I was a utility, a tool to be picked up when needed and put back in the drawer when finished. My name on the deed wasn't ownership in his eyes. It was just a clerical hurdle he had to jump over. He put it in writing, I said. My voice was quiet. He told a stranger that I am just an instrument. He thought he was talking man to man with another guy who would understand, Mila said. He didn't think you would ever see this. He was so sure, I said. He was so sure I would never fight back. Narcissists always are, Mila said. They mistake silence for submission. I looked at the email chain again. There was another message from my mother. Darla. Steve. Regarding the wire transfer, please ensure it routes to the joint account ending in 882. We want to avoid it going to Tessa's account to prevent any confusion with her student loans. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. My student loans are paid off, I said. I paid them off 5 years ago. She knows that. She just wanted to make sure the money didn't accidentally land in my possession, even for a second. Calculated, Mila said. Every step was calculated. The fake ID to control the mail, the bridge loan to secure the Florida condo, the email instructions to divert the funds. This was not lorem ipsum placeholder text. This was a heist. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Aunt Sharon. Tessa, please, your mother is hysterical. She says she's going to take a handful of pills if you don't stop this. Be the bigger person. I stared at the screen. Be the bigger person. That was the mantra of my childhood. Whenever Jared broke my toys, be the bigger person. Tessa, whenever my dad forgot my birthday, be the bigger person. Tessa, whenever my mom criticized my weight or my clothes, be the bigger person. Tessa. Being the bigger person just meant standing still while they cut pieces off me. I typed a reply to Aunt Sharon. If she is threatening self-harm, you should call 911. I am busy filing evidence with the district attorney. I hit send. Then I blocked Aunt Sharon. I looked up at Mila. What is the next step? The district attorney is reviewing the file for criminal charges, Mila said. Forgery in the first degree, identity theft, wire fraud, attempted grand theft, But the civil side is where we hurt them now. The buyer has canceled. The earnest money is frozen. The bridge loan for their Florida condo is coming due, and they don't have the cash to pay it off. So they lose the deposit on the condo? I asked. They lose the $50,000 deposit, Mila said. And since the bridge loan was secured by their current home, the house you grew up in, the lender will likely move to foreclose on that house to recoup the loan. They are going to lose everything, I said. They gambled everything, Mila corrected. They put their house on the table, betting they could steal yours. The wheel spun, and it landed on zero. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights of Port Clayton were blurring in the evening mist. I don't feel guilty, I said, testing the words to see if they were true. I waited for the pang of daughterly duty. I waited for the shame. It didn't come. All I felt was the cool, clean sensation of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. They treated me like a pen, I said to the reflection in the glass. Well, they are about to find out that a pen is a very dangerous thing when you use it to sign a police report. I turned back to Mila. Send the file to the prosecutor, I said. Send the emails. Send the brochure for the Florida condo. Send it all. I wanted on the record that when they said they were saving the family, they meant they were buying a beach view. Mila nodded and clicked the mouse. Sent, she said. The invisible tax was repealed. I wasn't paying anymore. The transition from a family dispute to a criminal investigation is not loud. It is terrifyingly quiet. It happens in the rustle of papers on a prosecutor's desk and the click of a timestamp on a digital file. 3 days after Mila forwarded the evidence package, the case was formally transferred from the Intake Division to the Special Financial Crimes Unit of the local district attorney's office. The charges being considered were heavy enough to sink a fleet of ships: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, first-degree forgery, and filing false instruments with a public office. I sat in Mila's office on a Wednesday morning, watching the rain streak the glass. We were not alone. Arthur Blanton, my parents' lawyer, was on the speakerphone. His voice had lost its initial bluster. It now sounded thin, reedy, and desperate. Look, Mila, Blanton said, the static crackling slightly. We are all reasonable people here. My clients, Gordon and Darla, are elderly. They are confused. They made a mistake in judgment, certainly. But do we really want to drag a 60-year-old couple through a criminal trial? Think of the optics. The optics, Mila replied, leaning back in her chair and staring at the ceiling. Look like two people who tried to steal $350,000 from their daughter. They are willing to settle, Blanton said quickly. We have a proposal. Gordon and Darla will sign a quitclaim deed formally disavowing any interest in the Cedar Avenue property. They will acknowledge Tessa is the sole owner. In exchange, Tessa withdraws her complaint with the district attorney and agrees to a non-disclosure agreement regarding this misunderstanding. I let out a laugh. It was involuntary, a short burst of air that sounded sharp in the quiet room. Mr. Blanton, I said, leaning toward the phone, you are offering to give me what I already have. I already own the house. The county knows I own the house. The state knows I own the house. You are offering to sell me my own property in exchange for my silence. We are offering peace, Ms. Langford, Blanton said, and we are prepared to cover your legal fees up to $5,000. My legal fees are currently $12,000, I said. And peace? You think this is about peace? If you proceed, Blanton warned, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, you are destroying your family. Your parents could face prison time. Your brother could face a felony record. Is that what you want on your conscience? Putting your own kin behind bars? My conscience is clear, I said. They are the ones who filed the false paperwork. They are the ones who involved the police, not me. I just reported a crime. Mila signaled for me to stop. She hit the mute button. He is fishing, she said. They are terrified. The prosecutor is sniffing around, and they know the evidence is overwhelming. They want you to kill the investigation before indictments come down. Can I even do that? I asked. Technically, no, Mila said. Once the state picks it up, It is the state's case, but if the victim, you, refuses to cooperate or asks for leniency, the DA often drops it or reduces the charges to a slap on the wrist. Blanton knows that. He needs you to soften up. I looked at the phone. Tell him no. Mila unmuted the line. Arthur, the offer is rejected. My client is not interested in a settlement that involves silence. We are proceeding. You are making a mistake, Blanton snapped, and then the line went dead. I left Mila's office feeling a strange vibration in my chest. It was the adrenaline of saying no. For 34 years, no had been a word I swallowed. Today, I had spit it out. By the time I got back to my apartment, my phone was buzzing again. It was Jared. He had not called since our recorded conversation where he confessed to the bribe. Now, he was texting. Jared. T. Please. Mom is inconsolable. She can't stop crying. She says she is sorry. We are all sorry. I will make them stop. I promise. Just tell the lawyer to back off. We can fix this ourselves. Jared. I will sign whatever you want. I will testify that Dad made me do it if that helps you. Just don't let them arrest me. I stared at the messages. I will make them stop. It was such a childish promise, as if he had any control over Gordon and Darla Langford, as if he wasn't just a terrified accomplice trying to save his own skin. We can fix this ourselves. That was the trap. That had always been the trap. Keep it in the house. Hide the bruises. Pretend the rot isn't eating the foundation. Fixing it ourselves meant me absorbing the cost and them absorbing the forgiveness. I sat down at my dining table and opened my laptop. I clicked on the file named The Invisible Tax. I read the entries again. October 2019. Dad calls my promotion lucky. July 2020. Mom asked to borrow $2,000 for medical bills that turns out to be a cruise deposit. August 2022. Jared crashes my car, and Dad blames me for letting him drive it. Last Tuesday. They try to sell my house. I looked at the pattern. It was a staircase. Every step I took back. They took 2 steps forward. Every time I forgave, they escalated. If I accepted Blanton's deal, if I took their apology and the $5,000 and let it go, what would happen next year? Maybe they wouldn't try to sell the house again. Maybe next time it would be opening credit cards in my name. Maybe it would be suing me for elderly support. If I showed mercy now, I wasn't buying peace. I was buying a target on my back. I was teaching them that the consequences of betraying me were negotiable. I closed the file. The anger was gone. In its place was something colder and harder, a resolution. I picked up the phone and called Mila. I have thought about it, I said. And? I do not need them to go to prison, I said. I do not want to visit my parents in a visiting room with glass walls. That does not bring me any joy. But I cannot go back to the way things were. I cannot let them think this is a game they can lose and just hit reset. So what is the objective? Mila asked. If not prison, what? I need a wall, I said. I need a legal, impenetrable wall. I want a court order that effectively divorces my finances from theirs forever. I want it on public record. We can do that, Mila said. We can push for a permanent injunction and a declaratory judgment. Instead of asking for jail time, we ask the prosecutor to offer a plea deal that includes strict probation and a permanent restraining order regarding your assets. We make them sign a confession in open court. Yes, I said. I want them to stand in front of a judge and say the words. I want it recorded, and I want a clause that says if they ever attempt to represent themselves as my agents again, or if they ever contact any financial institution connected to me, the probation is revoked and they go straight to jail. That is a sword of Damocles clause, Mila said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It hangs over their heads for the rest of their lives. One wrong move, and the thread snaps. Exactly, I said. I want their freedom to depend entirely on their ability to leave me alone. I will draft the proposal to the district attorney, Mila said. But we need to be ready for the hearing. We need to prove the intent was malicious, so the judge agrees to the severity of the order. We need Caleb. Is he willing? I spoke to him this morning, Mila said. Caleb Vance is not just willing, he is eager. He told me that in 10 years of escrow, he has never been so insulted by a file. He took the fake ID personally. He is ready to testify to the timeline, the fake documents, and the pressure they put on his office to close early. Good, I said. One more thing. Tessa, Mila said, her voice softening. This hearing, it is going to be brutal. You will have to sit in a courtroom while your parents cry. Your mother will play the victim. Your father will look at you like you are the devil. Are you ready for that? I looked around my apartment. It was quiet. It was mine. The deed on the table was mine. The future was mine. I have been trained for this my whole life, Mila, I said. They raised me to be tough. They just didn't realize I would eventually use that toughness against them. Okay, Mila said. Court is set for next Monday. We are going for the throat, but we are doing it with paper, not blood. I hung up. I did not reply to Jared. I did not reply to Blanton. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I printed out the email chain where my father called me a pen. I printed out the metadata from the fake ID. I organized the bank statements showing I was the only one who had ever put a cent into the property. I wasn't preparing a defense. I was preparing an autopsy of our relationship. Sunday night, the night before the hearing, I stood on my balcony. The rain had returned to Port Clayton, a soft, steady drizzle that washed the city clean. I thought about the invisible tax. For 34 years, I had paid it in silence. I had paid it with my self-esteem, with my money, with my boundaries. Tomorrow, the tax office was closing permanently. I went inside and laid out my clothes for court. A navy blue suit, sharp, professional. The kind of suit a project manager wears when she is about to deliver a project on time and under budget. I wasn't going to court to get revenge. Revenge is messy. Revenge is emotional. I was going to court to get a judgment, and judgments are final. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was a scent I had associated with speeding tickets or jury duty, but today, it smelled like the end of an era. I sat in the front row next to Mila. My spine was straight, my hands folded in my lap. I was not wearing the clothes of a victim. I was wearing my best architectural review suit, sharp lines and dark fabric, armor for the modern woman. Across the aisle, my family sat with their lawyer, Arthur Blanton. They looked diminished. My father, Gordon, usually a man who occupied space with loud laughter and expansive gestures, was hunched over, staring at his knuckles. My mother, Darla, was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, glancing at the judge with a look of bewildered offense, as if she could not believe the legal system would dare inconvenience her. And Jared looked sick. He was pale, his leg bouncing up and down in a nervous rhythm that vibrated the entire bench. We were not there for a trial. We were there for a plea hearing. But first, the facts had to be read into the record. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mrs. Galloway, did not rely on emotional appeals. She did not talk about betrayal or heartbreak. She talked about metadata. Your Honor, Mrs. Galloway said, her voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. The state has secured digital forensic evidence that proves this was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated manufacturing of documents. She held up a poster board. It was a blown-up image of the signature on the purchase agreement. This signature, she continued, was not written in ink. It is a vector graphic. Analysis of the source file confirms it was created on a tablet device registered to one Jared Langford on Sunday the 12th at 4:16 in the afternoon. At that specific time, the defendant Jared Langford was present in the victim's home, accessing her personal Wi-Fi network. I heard a small intake of breath from the defense table. Jared stopped bouncing his leg. Mrs. Galloway turned to the next exhibit. Furthermore, the defendants Gordon and Darla Langford signed a seller affidavit under penalty of perjury, asserting they were the legal owners of the property. They did this despite having received tax documents for 4 years clearly addressed to Tessa Langford. They knowingly submitted false instruments to a public office. The judge, a man with gray hair and a face carved from granite, looked over his glasses at my parents. "Mr. Langford," the judge said, "you are admitting to these facts as part of your plea?" Gordon stood up. He smoothed his jacket, even now, facing a judge. He tried to muster some shred of authority. "Your Honor," Gordon said, his voice raspy, "I admit that mistakes were made with the paperwork. We were under financial pressure, and we thought as the heads of the family, we had the right to manage the assets." "That is not the question," the judge cut in, his voice sharp. "Did you, or did you not, conspire to forge your daughter's signature to facilitate this sale?" Gordon hesitated. He looked at me. I met his gaze, my face a blank wall. He looked at the prosecutor. He looked at the potential jail time. Then, the survival instinct kicked in, the same instinct that made him buy a condo in Florida while drowning in debt. "I did not forge anything personally, Your Honor," Gordon said, his voice taking on a whining edge. "I am an old man. I barely know how to send an email. I told Jared we needed to get it done. Jared handled the computer stuff. He is the one who made the signature. I just told him to fix it." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a bus rolling over a body. I looked at Jared. His mouth was open. He stared at our father, the man he had idolized, the man he had tried to impress, the man he had sold me out for, and watched him point the finger squarely at him to save his own skin. The boy, Gordon had called him, not his son. The boy, the scapegoat. Jared slumped back in his seat, putting his face in his hands. In that single moment, the alliance that had tried to destroy me shattered into 3 distinct, terrified pieces. The judge looked at Jared. "Is that true, Miss Langford?" Jared did not look up. He just nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "I did the tech work." The judge made a note on his file. "Very well. The allocation of blame is noted for sentencing." The gavel came down, not with a bang, but with a dull thud that signaled the end of the negotiation. The terms were harsh. They were exactly what I had asked for. Gordon and Darla Langford were sentenced to 3 years of strict probation. They were ordered to pay full restitution for my legal fees, $12,400, within 60 days. But the part that mattered most was the permanent injunction. The judge read it aloud. "The defendants are permanently enjoined from claiming any interest, legal or equitable, in the property at 412 Cedar Avenue. They are prohibited from representing themselves as agents of Tessa Langford in any capacity. Any violation of this order will result in immediate revocation of probation and a mandatory custodial sentence of 18 months. Then came my specific request. "Additionally," the judge said, peering at the paper, "at the victim's request, a no-contact order is issued for the duration of the probation. The defendants may not contact the victim via phone, email, text, or third party, except through legal counsel. There will be no family discussions to pressure the victim into altering these terms." My mother let out a sob. "But she is our daughter." "Then you should have treated her like one, Mrs. Langford," the judge said, "instead of like a bank account." Jared's sentence was separate, because he had cooperated and had no prior record. He avoided jail, but he received 500 hours of community service and a permanent mark on his record for fraud. The consulting career he was trying to build was effectively dead. No corporate client would hire a consultant with a fraud conviction. And the $50,000 he was promised? It evaporated along with the sale. When the hearing ended, the bailiff dismissed us. I stood up. I shook Mila's hand. "Thank you," I said. "You saved my life." "You saved yourself," Mila said. "I just filed the paperwork." We walked out into the hallway. My family was there, huddled in a corner with Mr. Blanton. My mother saw me and took a step forward, her hands reaching out, her face crumpled in a mask of tragedy. "Tessa," she wailed. "Tessa, please, just one hug. We are ruined. The bank is taking the house. We have nowhere to go." I stopped. I looked at her. The bridge loan on their house had defaulted. With no Florida condo and no sale proceeds from my property, the foreclosure process on their home, my childhood home, had begun yesterday. They were indeed ruined. But I remembered the brochure for the Azure Coast. I remembered the email where my father called me a pen. I remembered Jared copying my signature while I made him tea. I stepped back. "Talk to Mr. Blanton," I said. "I cannot speak to you. It is a violation of your probation." I turned my heel and walked toward the exit. "Tessa!" my father shouted. It was a command. I did not flinch. I did not slow down. I walked through the double doors and out into the cool, gray afternoon. 3 months later, I stood in the living room of 412 Cedar Avenue. The house was empty. The tenants had moved out the week before, an amicable departure for a job relocation, and I was there to inspect the paint. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The house was quiet. It was solid. It was real. I walked to the kitchen island, the place where I had once stood eating noodles to save money for the roof repair. I ran my hand over the granite countertop. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an alert from Zillow. Listing update, 1505, Oak Ridge Lane, foreclosure auction scheduled for Friday. My parents' house, the house where I had learned to walk, the house where I had learned to be quiet. It was hitting the auction block. I swiped the notification away. It was not my tragedy. It was just a market event. I looked around my rental property. The market value had gone up another 5% since the attempted theft. I had a choice to make. I could sell it now, take the cash, and buy a place closer to my office, or I could keep it, rent it out again, and let the equity build. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like fresh paint and ownership. I decided to keep it. Not because I needed the money, but because I liked knowing it was here. It was a monument to the day I stopped being a good girl and started being a formidable woman. I walked out to the front porch and locked the door. The key turned with a satisfying, heavy click. It was the only sound that mattered. My family was somewhere in a rented apartment, blaming me, blaming the lawyers, blaming the world. They were drowning in the consequences of their own greed. I walked down the steps to my car. I did not look back. I did not need to check if the door was locked. I knew it was. I was the one holding the keys. Revenge is not about burning someone else's house down. It is about locking your own door and letting them stand outside in the rain they created. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how I handled my family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear that standing up for yourself is always the right choice.